Welcome, I'm Giulia.
And I am Marta.
And this is LateMode, a podcast in search of the zeitgeist. Through a series of conversations, we explore the fragmented and hyper-connected modes of our current times. Hello, it's Giulia here, and thank you for listening in. In this episode, I'm in Portugal, and I sat down with Jonatan Kilefors. Jonatan is a very talented AI artist with a background in virtual and augmented reality content production. Together, we discuss the exciting possibilities and challenges that lie ahead in the world of AI art, digital technology, and blockchain. From the potential of digital communities in promoting freedom of expression, we delve into how technology is shaping our relationship with one another, as well as with our artistic practices. Guided by the topic of hope, we talked about our expectations on digital technologies in the future. Stay with us for a thought-provoking conversation at the intersection of art, technology, and society.
Hello, it's me. It's me, Jonatan.
You define yourself as an AI artist?
Yeah, I mean, there are many different words for this sort of thing. It's a completely recent thing, and I think this is what makes the most sense. I think people get instantly what it's about. I make art with the help of AI, and that's pretty much it. But some other people would call it something else. I don't know, prompt artists, because what we basically do is we sit and feed a bunch of random words to an algorithm, and then the AI stitches that together. Maybe most of the listeners have seen these funny DALL-E pictures or anything by Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and they have a specific look to it. Some is quite uncanny, some is beautiful, and I think it's a lot of fun.
Okay, can we explain what Stable Diffusion is for people who have no clue?
Yeah. I mean, Stable Diffusion is probably the most accessible algorithm on the market that does text to image. So text to image is this thing I described with prompting. And what distinguishes Stable Diffusion from the other ones like Midjourney or DALL-E 2 is that it's completely open source. So as long as you have your own computer that is able to run these algorithms, you require quite good computer. You can just run it for free. You still have to pay for the electricity and whatnot, but...
Yeah, that's what I find absolutely amazing when you were showing me these programs, these softwares that I had no idea they even existed and what you can actually create with them. But actually, I wanted to go a little bit back in your journey because you started with studying visual communication.
I wanted to make films first. I was making YouTube videos when I was, a teenager. And then I switched to illustration because I just didn't like the, physical challenges that comes with recording. You have to sit and wait about the weather, or you have to rely on actors. So I thought, okay, I'll start drawing my stories instead. And from there, I didn't feel like comics was a powerful enough medium. That's why I was kind of drawn to VR, which I ended up studying. There was this program called Immersive Experience Creator, which probably doesn't make sense to most people, and it's kind of, it's a little bit pretentious. I don't know, this title, but you would call it virtual reality and augmented reality content creation. It's the creative aspects of this emerging medium. I was led to the AI in a way that it's so easy to create, with this thing. Anyone can basically just write in these words and you have something they're very immersive creation, and you can integrate these creations into all sorts of things, I would say. It would.
But then how I see it is you obviously need to give prompts to this software, and those prompts need to come from somewhere. So when you begin a new project, let's say, where do you go searching for those prompts? Is this also connected to the reason why you were interested in comics, for example? Because I see comics as a character building.
Yeah, I feel just creating images by itself isn't sufficient for me. I want to create narratives of some sort. We can get into that later, but there are new types of storytelling that comes with internet and how you deliver the artworks in forms of NFTs. I mean, like, I've been a nerd throughout my whole life when it comes to consuming stuff. Like when I was a young teenager, I was obsessed with like rock music. So I learned everything about that, like sitting on Wikipedia, clicking all the hyperlinks, like, oh, okay, so Nirvana is influenced by Pixies and Pixies are influenced by Husker Du, like, and you just went back in time and you started mapping out kind of how the history of music actually took shape. And, eventually it moved on to film, it moved on to the arts, it moved on to everything. So I've just consumed a lot of things. So when I actually write a prompt, it just have a huge database, collected in my mind and also like saved on like, Pinterest or, one of these sites I catalog my films on. And I would just have a lot of, different associations that I've collected throughout the years that helped me a lot. I don't know how everyone else does it, like when it comes to this. And sometimes it's also funny that, when you're on Pinterest, you're sort of like in the chewing mouth of the algorithms, like you're sitting and writing for the stable diffusion, the prompts, and then to find inspiration, you're clicking on images on Pinterest, like, I don't know exactly what I want, but I kind of want to go in this direction, and the algorithm just leads you further down in possibly a better direction. And you say, okay, I like this artist, I'll try to incorporate something there, or if it's like texture, or if it's...
So it sounds like you have a lot of trust in these algorithms.
Yeah, but I think they work so far. And I mean, we're working together, me and AI, so it's like it's me selecting the images, but they're also giving me all sorts of options.
And like this idea that a software can actually aid you in communicating what you want to communicate. Does this make it a better medium?
Yeah, well, it does and doesn't. Like, the thing with AI is you never really get what you want. But I never got what I wanted when I was drawing, for example. I just drew a line and see where it went. I don't have anything particular in my mind. I just rearrange stuff.
So is it a way to express your imagination?
Yeah, I mean, I just like being reactive to things. Like, I see one thing and I respond to it. I see one thing and I respond to it. That I enjoy. Whether that's, well, obviously it's a creative thing, but it's not like I have a gigantic vision from the start. I just want to fall down the stream and see what happens, if that makes any sense.
Well, I think that this, to me, it also connects, we have this topic of hope that we're discussing today. And one of the questions that I have in mind is, do you actually have any hopes? Hopes of communicating a certain specific message? Or are those like ways through which you just explore, as I said, maybe your imagination, and then this might lead you to something?
I mean, like, this reactive thing within anyone's mind is always guided by something. It's just that I don't fully understand it until it actually has, manifested itself. But one thing that's particularly prominent within the creation of AI art is that, you can generate all sorts of stuff. I can create beautiful things, but it doesn't feel like me, So you try to stay away from these things, and I try to move on towards like where I know like this is some sort of truth that I know.
Wait, what do you mean it doesn't feel like you?
It feels inauthentic. If I would go out and pick artists that I don't resonate with as a style, combine them, and then pick a subject like that's completely foreign to me. Like if I would, let's say, try to do like something very naturalistic, realistic, that would just feel super strange to me. Like, even if I could do it quite well, most people could do it quite well instantaneously, but you gotta pick a subject that is close to your understanding of the world or your metaphysics, or sometimes it takes, thousands of iterations before you find anything that's close to what you want. I mean, it's not an easy thing. Like, to create something exactly in the style of a particular artist, that's very easy. But that's never what I'm going for. It's about combining new things and create new things, because that's what's exciting.
And so just also for people who are listening and might not know. So after you generate these images, then you turn them into NFTs. You put them somewhere. What do you do?
Well, I'm active on Twitter primarily. That's where I found a big AI art community, and there are quite a few collectors there as well, which incredibly has supported me. I didn't expect such a thing to happen so soon, but it did, which is absolutely wonderful.
Well, you just said something, you just said the community there. So these communities are mostly digital. And how much of a role do you think this plays also in your choice, for example, dedicate much more time or getting much more into this type of artistic expression?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it more immersive, you know, and you feel like you have something at stake when there are other people, you know, liking your images, buying them, commenting, and you know, there are all sorts of collaborations going on, you know, just within art. And it's also, you know, talking about certain things. You know, there are these Twitter spaces where people get together in the evening and they discuss, you know, whatever there is to be discussed that night. You know, like there's so much going on behind the scenes, you know, like people sending messages to one another, and I don't know, like it's it's very strange and very novel, these things. There's I'm not sure what's going on, but there is a general feeling within the community that they have to build it up, you know, like it's just, you know, people just get it from the start as they enter the space that they have to help other artists. Like if there's a successful artist, he usually uses his profits to trickle it down, you know, like he uses a specific percentage to buy art from other artists he likes. It's you know, the idea that there needs to be a great ecosystem for them to also thrive. So it's not entirely like a selfless thing, it's a selfish thing as well, which I mean, I have no quarrels with that, but it's
and you think this is proper of the more sort of digital communities rather than...
I mean, I cannot say about the other communities because I haven't been part of them really, but here it becomes very clear because you notice like who's on top, because you can see who's making the biggest sales. You know, everyone can see it, and you can see who collects them, where they will be resold to, and who has the most likes. You know exactly. Obviously, like the amount of followers won't tell you who's the best at anything, but this is kind of how it works, you know, to some degree. And in that way, you see like these people are very sharing, you know, and they try to make it work.
I think what the first question that really comes to mind when I am talking to you, who is a person, as I said, that occupies more digital spaces, is what is really in your mind this difference between being in a digital space and being in a physical space. Like right now we're discussing, you know, there is a difference in behaviors, for example, in how a community functions. But how do you see it like developing as more of these spaces are actually being available and being used? And how do you see it evolving? Or to go back to the topic of hope, do you have any hopes for these spaces that will go in a certain direction?
Obviously, I think it's a fantastic tool, you know, like it's the most powerful tool we have. If you compare it, for example, to the narrative building within a social context that we had in the past, would be like television or the newspaper, you know, it would just be, the communication would just be going in one direction from the newspaper to the reader. But now the narrative that's being created, it's participatory, you know, it's coming from all sorts of directions, and it can get rather chaotic in that kind of way. But I find it great, you know, that we're able to co-create this instead of it's just, you know, a few media men who says what to think or feel, you know, like it's...
But it can be chaotic.
Of course. This is what this entire age is about, right? Like, you know, the age of misinformation they talk about, and, you know, everybody has their own opinion on things, and you don't have the full context because, you know, the only thing you get is like a username and a profile picture and a few metrics here and there, like followers. It's like you don't know who these people are. So I mean, people get lost in all of this. And since there's so much information as well, like you're getting behaviorally stuck, you know, in scrolling, and sometimes not actually taking the time to, you know, leave great comments, try to create a good space. But it, you know, that comes down to how you use it. But, you know, people get caught in just the scroll forever.
So would you say that if those spaces will be more participatory, that will encourage people, for example, leaving more comments instead of just simply consuming those spaces, they would actually become better spaces?
I think the best accounts out there are the ones who really invite their followers into the discussion. And that's what everybody wants, I think, really, in all of this. Not just be mindless consumers. Yeah, I mean, to bring this into the whole blockchain world, like this is what it's about, you know, like the cryptocurrencies were in part, like Ethereum, the second largest one, was the story behind that was that the creator, he was dissatisfied when his favorite class in World of Warcraft got nerfed, as you put it, but they made his character worse. And he felt it was unfair, like why did they make it worse? So he thought like, maybe we can create games that everybody's involved in creating. And from there, he created the second largest cryptocurrency. And this is the idea that comes through both on Twitter, but also with NFTs and creating of art, and that you can actually program, you know, your artworks to do certain things with other people.
So if I understand it correctly, you're relating this technology of blockchain to the, let's say, more artistic and creative world in a way that by working together this technology with something like creating art NFTs, you can make these artworks more collaborative, more engaging for people who consume them as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And is this happening already, do you think? Or is it more like, again, for talking about hope, is this a hope that you have for the future?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like it is happening, but it's not exactly within the art world, you know, like the whole idea of metaverse blew up, what was it, a year ago. And the idea of the metaverse is that, you know, it's a bottom up sort of internet where everybody provides with a little piece of their own to create a never ending digital space pretty much. And what's happening within, it's mostly games really that this happens. You know, within certain platforms, like creators can contribute with, you know, new skins, hats, new dance moves, weapons, you know, custom art. And art will obviously play a big role in all of this. It just hasn't got to that point yet, but it will, because there are a lot of smart people building these platforms already.
I mean, it also makes me think that until now, perhaps this is also because I'm from, let's say, another bubble, but until now maybe people feel that it's a little bit of a separate bubble with, like, you know, different terminologies, different things to understand, that kind of really separates this technological world from what you're actually doing in this more physical space. How do you see it evolving? Like, do you think it will become more approachable? Will people become more interested, or is the community actually trying to break through this bubble, for example?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. Like, I think the missing piece is augmented reality, AR. So augmented reality is when you combine the ideas of virtual reality, like the spatial computing aspect, that it's able to read like where you are in the space, and also, you know, read your hand movements and whatnot with the physical world. So, you know, let's say in 5 years of time, maybe a lot of people will be wearing glasses to see certain things in the world that are actually not there, you know, they're digitally just there. And I think that's the missing piece to merge the digital world with the physical world. And eventually, you know, I don't think we'll have smartphones. We'll just have smart glasses, and we'll, you know, have it within our field of vision all the time. You know, like seeing Google Maps might be as normal as seeing color at some point.
And going back to making art, what will happen to, I don't know, painting, drawing with the pen?
I think it will be seen in the same way as we look at, an acoustic guitar to an electric guitar, or maybe if you want to go back even further, there are certain practices that people really enjoy, like let's say realistic painting. You can produce these artworks in a matter of seconds with a camera, yet there are people who really love looking at hyper-realistic drawings, for example. I really don't see the idea of why I should do hyper-realistic drawing when I can do it so quickly with a camera, but some people like the process.
But so the way that I see it, when I think about technology and how it's developing faster and faster, so many things to me feel that are accelerating a little bit faster in the last 15 years maybe than they have been, but that's my own opinion. But when I hear of also concerns of people being, well, where is this technology going to lead us to completely dismiss, for example, our own practices or our own relationships to one another, so not being behind computers or something. It makes me think in the way that I see it, that technology is not so separated from us after all. So in what you were describing, giving prompts to the software, I also see it as, in order for any software to develop and advance, we need to first investigate a lot of what we actually need, a lot of what we actually are as humans before translating this into codes or behaviors that you put into a machine. And yeah, as I understand it, you also have this view of seeing technology as an aid, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's the only thing it is, but these are tools and ways of communicating as well. If we go back to the idea of television and newspaper, the technology is changing how we relate to other people.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. You say that technology is changing the way that we relate to other people. But then, so in your view, technology, is it separated from us as a collective of people who are also making this technology? Or is it merely a reflection, of already certain behaviors and certain dynamics that are translated into that technology? So that's something that I feel I'm very curious to hear what you think, because you're...
I love this Swedish philosopher, Alexander Bard, and he has this idea that it's not the philosophers or the artists that really decide the future of the world. It's the engineers, the inventors. They're the most powerful things we have. That's what really differentiates humans from most animals. And these tools, they create new realities. They create new, let's say, metagames. Once the computer came to the field, everything changed. Who will be successful in this world compared to 3,000 years ago? So, the world is decentralizing. I think that's almost a fact at this point. And with this whole participatory culture, everybody has a stake in everything. So in that way, it is fragmenting. Maybe we won't have the nation states in 100 years, that we had.
Is this what you hope?
I don't know if I hope that. I think that will be rather scary. But I think it's gonna be difficult to agree once we all come from such different places, because everybody has their own little culture within these digital societies, and it's no longer based upon superficial things like ethnicity, geography, or gender, whatever. It's going to be based upon interest, and basic people might not be able to get along anymore in the geographical space because they feel alienated from one another. So in that way, technology is fragmenting us. But in another way, we're more connected than ever. I don't really know how to put these ideas together, but I think there will be counter trend eventually, but I don't know how long it will take where we will merge back from this fragmentation.
I think that this is much related to how I view the whole idea of using, for example, technology, and in this case, the use of prompting to create art is very much related to a bigger discussion. What do we expect from these technologies that we use? Where do we want to take them? And maybe I should pose all of these questions directed at you.
Well, there are many directions, but let's talk specifically about the AI art here. Like, the first thing that I think that people will be able to accomplish with this that hasn't been before is the fact that you can create an enormous amount of content in such a short period of time. You can create really good stuff. And that means like one person might, I don't think currently, but in a few years, maybe one person will be able to create whole productions that's akin to, you know, a Pixar or a Marvel production, let's say, or a small team will be able to do that. So that's one hope, and I sincerely think it will happen, but I don't know to what sort of fidelity it will come to. And secondly, I think this medium that we're talking about, AI art, will tip everything upside down when it comes to when we think about copyright. Because I mean, like the AI isn't doing any sort of copyright infringement. It's learning from a whole bunch of stuff, but it's not taking one pixel from copyrighted material. But when anyone can simply just take a style and use it to themselves, then you gotta like think about like what will happen with copyright then, you know, like even if Picasso owns his paintings, but I'll be able to produce 5,000 other ones like that, you know, what will happen to giant production houses like, you know, Disney or Marvel, as I mentioned, like.
No, but also to the whole art economy in a way, right? Also, because yeah, what would galleries look like? What would collectors and vendors of art and exhibitions, how do you see this?
I would like to go back a long time, like way back, you know, let's go back 10,000 years, you know, like what was art back then? It was like these cave paintings. And, you know, if somebody went and did that today, they wouldn't say that's art. But it was art because they first realized like, hey, you know, we can represent reality in this way on the walls here. That's amazing. And then you go from there to the next step, which is like, I would say like religious art, which is, you know, we know how to represent meaning in our pictures. That's what art was about in the West until at least up to the Renaissance. And then the Renaissance, they started realizing what reality sort of looked like, you know, realize mathematics and symmetry and color theory and how these things harmonize with one another. So that was art then, but then they kind of conquered that notion. So to do that was just, you know, you're doing a copy of something. So the next frontier of art was, you know, the camera was invented around that time. So the movement was to invent new styles, and that's when you had, you know, painters like Van Gogh and eventually, you know, the other ones like Picasso, Dali and whatnot. And now we're at this point where anyone can take somebody's style. I cannot say fully like what's going to happen, but it's the next generation of artists. They're not going to think about style. That would be absurd, I think. Like maybe we'll get more into ideas, themes, you know. It's too soon to say.
I mean, that's a little bit what the prompting is, no? Like what we were talking about before, like to be able to give prompts to these softwares that you're using, you still need to process something from somewhere and then feed it through And then you're not thinking about the style. You're basically just thinking about the concept behind it.
Yeah, in a way. Like, obviously, there is a level of style put into it. Maybe it's just because I was brought up in this era, you know. I'm still confined to these old ideas of thinking about art.
The aesthetic, you mean?
Style and aesthetics, you know. Like, maybe, you know, in 500 years, that won't matter at all in art, if that even exists then. But most things has been done within these fields. Like, sure, not everything, but I think we're closing in on something entirely new when it comes to art, when, you know, we can also skip, you know, like learning about composition and color, since the AI already knows this. Okay, I can focus on something else entirely. And what is that going to be about?
But then you also said that when you feel that the AI is creating something that is not akin to you, I imagine this is also to your own aesthetic. Then you don't feel like you should go or follow through.
Yeah. I mean, we still need the instinct to aesthetics to judge whether something is good or bad. I mean, beauty matters, but to be impressive when everybody can create beautiful artworks, like in a matter of seconds, like, you know, what do you have to do to stand out at that point?
What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. Like, I think something will come along. Like, maybe it's all-inclusive concepts, you know, like maybe it's about relating them to as many sort of things as possible at the same time, and make them sort of chain reactionary in a way that hasn't been done before. And sort of make them capture this idea of how we're all interconnected, which has become so prominent once internet came along.
I already see it all interconnected. So I see the creation of like digital artwork or AI artwork already embedded within a digital community, and it's not, to me at least, is not really separated. And also listening to you, what you mentioned, that, you know, you release this artwork, then you have people viewing it, commenting it, wanting to collect it once it's minted into an NFT or in a collectible item. Yeah, this is in itself already connected. I mean, it's already part of it. So it's already this new way of generating, not only generating and creating, but also the aftermath of this creation is already embedded into something different than, for example, when you create a painting and then you go through submitting your painting to a gallery and these other sets of...
I actually have a point here. Are you aware of the interior design of Guggenheim, the art museum? Like, they have a few ones scattered around the world, but it's the Guggenheim, and there's a bunch of variants. I visited one in Bangkok quite recently, which had the same sort of interior, which you have this spiraling, winding, it's not a staircase, but it's a sort of platform that's ascending in a spiral against the wall, that's just going up and up and up. And when I was there in Thailand at this art gallery, it was very interesting because no one was there for the art. They were there for, you know, putting it on their TikTok or their Instagram, you know. So as I was going up this spiral, I had to stop every like minute or so because there was a picture that needed to be taken. And, you know, you enter the actual gallery space and it's the same thing, you know. This gallery space is completely outdated. They're not allowing people to participate. They want to participate and they do it in this completely detached space, which is Instagram or TikTok, whatever they're using. So if you want to talk about art galleries, they need to think of ways of democratizing their space and make it more exciting for people to be there. It should be like a game. Everything should be branching. Everything should have implications, what you do. Like, that's what people want, I find nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of this, I remember when we were talking about Thailand in specific, also maybe relating to this example that you're mentioning, but how the use of TikTok or the use of these kind of spaces in a country like Thailand, in which I've recently spent 3 months, that they kind of change, right? They are using, for example, those platforms to actually express their own freedom, their own ideas, as their government is maybe more repressing.
Yeah, it's quite conspicuous that Southeast Asian countries are the countries that uses the most, cryptocurrencies, NFTs and whatnot. I think Thailand is the number one, and then it's like Vietnam and Indonesia. Like there's a whole bunch of like super successful Thai, Indonesian, Vietnamese artists that made a great living out of selling their artworks. They're super talented, and no one would have heard about them if it wasn't for these things. Yeah, since they know they're oppressed, the Thai people, and they're not allowed to talk about, like, it's strictly illegal to say anything negative about the king and the royal family. And what happens is that people are opting out of these old systems, I find, through digital means. They try to establish themselves as, YouTubers, influencers, and then you got newer platforms like Naver C, which is like a 3D social platform. Like it's basically a game mainly directed towards women, girls, that you can express yourself however you want, which wouldn't be possible in the real world. And what has happened with that is that content creators can create fashion and furniture, all sorts of stuff that people want to buy, and they become hugely successful through these platforms. And that what you see in China, for example, is that the government has made it illegal, they regulated video gaming. Like anyone who's below 18 isn't allowed to play for more than 3 hours a week. Because, they called video games like a spiritual opium. They have like huge centers to try and cure people from the video game addiction. And the interesting thing is to think about, like, why is it so widespread within these societies? It's because they have no sense of impact, and they finally feel like they have a sense of impact within the video games.
But it's also quite popular, I guess, the whole gaming industry in Europe, for example. Or don't you see it also rising in popularity all over? And do you think it's for the same reason?
Well, obviously it is to some extent, but I don't think the addiction is as widespread in the Western world. I might be wrong, but I think the reason for that is that it's a more equal society in the West. So therefore people feel they can actually gain a sense of agency within whatever they decide to do, like if it's work or family that they decide is the most important thing in their life. But yeah, I think it turns quite dangerous if you think the most important thing in your life is a video game that has no, meaningful connection to the rest, like it doesn't integrate within the rest of your life.
And how do you see yourself as somebody who has actually been studying even within the video game or gaming industry and learned how to engage, at least on a visual level, people into a game? Like how do you see this?
Yeah, but like I was addicted to video games when I was a teenager. Like it stopped me from doing things I would rather do. And obviously it's part comes down to how you treat these things. If you just play them for the sake of playing them, like you would do if you're addicted to drugs, then it's a mentality problem. I don't think regulating them is a great idea, because you want like a free culture and whatnot, then there shouldn't be anyone saying like, oh, this is a too addictive game, whatever it is. But I really think, like, as this becomes more clear to game designers, that maybe we should create even more meaningful games, that pervades more aspects of our lives. Like this is what you call like gamification, where people go out for a jog when they have their iPhone on their strapped onto their arm to see like how many calories did I burn, or like that's a form of gamification that like we make it even more meaningful, since you can see the numbers, and maybe you can connect that to even more things. And I think the games will just get more and more immersive as we go, and maybe it will become less interesting to just do these mindless games all the time, as these other games become better and more integrative in all aspects of lives. I think it's just hard to compete.
Yeah, I mean, we have always had these discussions in the whole year that we've known each other, that I've always been this anti-game person in a way, that I see it from an outsider perspective always as something, precisely what you just described, maybe that gets people addicted to it, or that prevents them from doing something else because they're, I don't know, playing for like 8 hours a day, and sort of have been always a little bit skeptical around them. And I feel that this is maybe also the whole discussion that we had today around technologies and those forms of how the technology can advance and what it can do to us. Maybe it is also a question of information and a question of breaking a little bit the bubble, so that people are actually learning more about what is this, how does it affect us, but also how is it made. I think a lot of the, not the scary part, but the sort of skepticism comes from also not understanding that you can create technology that goes hand in hand with human needs. Like what you're saying, like to be able to gamify something, you also really have to go deep into an understanding of human behavior, of like what is play, what does make us not get addicted but get entertained, or this kind of prompts that you need to feed this machine that creates games, or however you code it. To me, it's very interesting that in the process of doing this, that you can actually learn so much about us, like being humans.
I think as we get a more integrative digital world that also integrates with, our psychology, our physical world, I think we can create more categories or things that people, especially young people, can get involved with, where they feel like they have impact, where they feel like they are making a difference. And I think that's what this entire movement is about. Like, it's not about the art, it's about the medium itself, how everything will interconnect and give us more purpose. Feel like, if I do this, these people will get this great thing. I'm giving away like so much, and I'm so happy that this happens actually. And this is to prevent people from getting into these like closed systems, like with normal video games, like you just play and that just leads to more play. It doesn't lead to anything. So I truly think we're gonna get a gorgeous world, not only, but it's gonna be a lot of problem. But I think this whole thing, that's the next frontier. Really.
Which whole thing?
Some people like to call it metaverse, Web3, or just the internet, really. Like, it's the same thing. And allowing the users to control what they want to do with it, not have like someone at the top saying, you cannot do this or that. That should be decided from below, not from the top. And that's shifting right now. And to wrap it up with AI as well, is that, these tools is like, I've heard some people comparing like having an AI as art assistant, like how many art assistants does Jeff Koons have? Hundreds, 200s? I don't know. Like, he probably has many, and he can produce a whole array of artworks all the time and sell it. But if you don't have the money, or just, you're starting out, you're not able to do that until now. So just go back like 20 years ago, and that's when YouTube started, and that was the same thing. You're disrupting TV. Anyone can produce content, and now anyone can be their own little factory, like art factory, let's say, as didn't Warhol call that. Don't be a factory, but you're producing. You can produce a lot of stuff in a small period of time.
And this production will go, in your hopes at least, towards more engagement.
Yeah, more immersive worlds, like created worlds, That's for me at least. Like,
Some more imagination.
yeah, I don't want to live in physical reality. I want to live in completely made up realities. And I think
But we are still living in a physical reality, though.
Yeah, are we? I don't know if I am. I'm always in my imagination, I find.
To add on what you said, I really like this idea. I mean, this potential that we can imagine more and more. I think that's actually something that we probably need. Maybe I say it from a different standpoint. I'm not so much thinking that I don't live in a physical world, but I do think that by imagining more, like more potential, scenarios, more ways that we could be living differently than how we are, then maybe there's a lot there. I mean, there is a whole, when we talk about like restructuring and dismantling and these big words that they can also make no sense at all, because it's like how do you do this? Like, how do you restructure something that is so embedded? And maybe together with those technologies, actually, our imagination can go even as far as we cannot even think about, actually.
We've always been living in imaginations, like, isn't partaking in religion is a form of imagination. And I mean, these are just myths. And what's happening now is that these myths become so tangible that they might be indistinguishable from reality itself. But to actually manifest the digital into something physical, that might be hard. There's this old idea, I mean, not crazy old. The inventor of VR, Jaron Lanier, had this idea of an octopus-like mechanical thing that could change in shape depending on the input, and I've been thinking about this idea a bit. Imagine like you construct an entire world out of this material that you will be able to bend at will through it's algorithms or program. Like, we're talking far ahead in the future, and in that way maybe we'll be able to manifest it completely physically. But I mean, it's not within our lifetime. I don't know if this was too crazy of an idea, but...
No, I think that's an idea on how this could be possible, no?
Yeah. And I think reality could be programmable at some point, or to some extent, maybe not to...
Yeah, I mean, you just saying this just made me think of the design of cities, for example. This whole imagining that a structure like a city will take form, and then actually making these buildings, like materially making those buildings that actually do give then a space for this like imagination that then is like inhabited by all these people, and things like start forming from there.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, like there are very interesting blockchain projects out there that are trying to bring this democratized collaborative way into actual cities. There's this project called IOTA. So there is this thing called IoT, which means Internet of Things. So it's how you interconnect all sorts of things. It would be like the air conditioner in your house. You could control it with your phone. That's a very basic thing. But you also interconnect that with your fridge and your greenhouse, and then you go further to connect it with let's say the traffic and the lights that go on and off. And if it's done right, it could be turned completely democratized, and could allow for what is possible and what is not possible.
How does this turn, what is the democratic part of this technology?
First of all, the blockchain, there's not a single entity that controls it, like that is able to say what can be done or not. Like, that's the code that decides it. And within most of these blockchains, there's some sort of consensus mechanism that decides how are we gonna implement the next thing, how are we gonna set these rules. And most of them do that through voting. And I mean, like, this is just beginning. Like, so it's hard to see what is the most fair way of actually implementing this. But they are attempting different things. And we'll see what will happen.
So you see these kind of technologies as one way to really bring what we were discussing as something maybe a bit of a abstract ideas of how things could work and materialize them into applying them to different things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there will be much of a difference between, how the traffic will work and your role as a citizen or a participant in a political system. You'll be able to influence that probably in the future in real time. But it's too difficult to say exactly at this point how it will look like.
Well, it seems like it's something that, the way that you're describing it, something that if we're talking about hope, something that will be taken at least into consideration, like how to make those systems like work in a way where we can all participate to them if we're actually involved in them.
That would be the best vision of it. I mean, there's also the dystopian vision with you would have the Chinese system where everything is controlled from the very top, and that would be horrible, and it would be extremely difficult to opt out of that if it actually implements. So I think just trying to convey to as many people as possible to align themselves with this idea early on, that they know they can opt out from any moment. Like, there should always be an option to opt out, and that's how you guarantee there will not be a crazy dictatorship forever.
It's also about making those technologies as accessible as possible to everyday people, because in the way that I see it, if something like this is just in the hand of one person or one government, or just the state apparatus, for example, you don't also have the knowledge of like the required understanding of what this technology even is. So in my opinion, it's also about informing or just trying to engage people to really understand how is this technological advancement even going. Because when I think of my personal experience, like sometimes I feel, intimidated by it, and in a way that I say, I don't understand what this is. Must be something, that only certain types of people can use or understand. And that's why I appreciated so much that so many things within this digital space are open source, or are actually, as you were mentioning before, also they're so open, like community-wise, that people are very, you want to learn about something and you want to be part of this development, you actually can.
Yeah, it's just start. Basically, it's really not that difficult, and there will always be someone who appreciates you, it feels like, and you just gotta find the right people, and eventually you'll find your great role within all of it. I find that, it's beautiful, really.
Nice. Well, I think I just have one last question for you, which is to leave a topic for our next guest.
Who's the next guest?
We don't know.
You don't know.
Also, you shouldn't know. I mean...
I think to go on the same sort of thing we discussed today, like I think it should be about integration. I'm not talking about some sort of migration integration, but I'm talking about integrating things into a coherent system, and it's up to you to decide what that system is. It's important to have, integrity. Integrity is important.
No, wait. Integrity is not related to integration.
No. Integrity means to have
True.
all of these values aligned in a coherent way.
If that's ever possible.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's always going to be things. But the next guest, he or she will talk about integrity.
Integrity, so not integration.
Same thing for me. But
same thing for you?
But
we have to decide on one.
I think integrity, but not from a personal perspective. Should be systematic integrity.
Thank you. I feel like this has just been like a little bit of a nice trip outdoor. This is how I would describe this chat, but really good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Thanks.
I love that.
Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If you want to dive deeper into the show, don't forget to check the podcast description for extra resources, contact information, and a sign-up form for our newsletter. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, take care.